Welcome to Mindful Drawing. I'm Robert, and I'll be your guide on this meditative practice that enters a space of mindfulness through the act of drawing. This week, we'll use our mind's eye, our imagination, to pull up a collective image, each of us our own experience with being out in nature, perhaps being in a forest, in a park, somewhere where we are surrounded by trees of varying types, surrounded by those verticality, surrounded by that verticality, those extensions upwards, that broadness of branches filling our vision, a perspective towards a point, as well as a soft filtering through that convergence above. We'll pull into our imagination, our experience, perhaps sitting, laying, or just walking through a grove of trees, of looking up for a moment and marveling at that height, that filter of light, that stillness that can exist for a little while in that context. As we draw, we'll try to use our mindfulness to keep that image coming back, oscillating through us, translating from something we see for a moment inside to something that extends out and expresses on that piece of paper. I'll use a mechanical pencil probably for the whole exercise, maybe a pen if I feel a little more value is needed, but something that you can draw with easy and light. I like these heavier rotring pencils for drafting from my background in drawing and architecture, but something that holds well in the hand, that can be balanced, that lets you draw in many directions, up, down, left, right, as will work around a center, an opening up, that bright spot up above, filling out some space with converging lines, forming that grove of trees, holding us, surrounding us, bringing us a space of relaxation, of even, calming breath, and of creativity and expression on the page. The feeling and the intention behind today's exercise is inspired by a recent trip out to the western United States and northern California's Redwood forests. A first time for me to see that and see some images from that adventure here on the screen to help share my mind's imagination coming to this exercise. But we've all been to different places with different types of forests gathering above that we can bring into our imagination, or use these if they stick with you on the screen. That feeling of stillness in motion that can exist under the filtered light is where we want to find ourselves, observe how that brings action, expression, and creativity to our day. A pad of paper, a sketchbook, pen or pencil, anything you'd like to draw with and draw on will do. So go ahead and gather your supplies, establish your space, and let's draw together. Imagine laying on the ground, a little damp, the air cool surrounding you. Imagine opening the eyes and looking up. The light filtered through the trees, a forest holding you to the earth. Imagine drips of water, a soft breeze, the little bit of movement of the hair through the needles. Imagine height, reaching up towards that light, reaching towards the sun. Imagine ground holding below a foundation. Imagine tree. I thought we could all share an image of that convergence of trees above us, that filter of light, whatever context that may be. We'll explore giving that a little perspective, a little feeling overhead as they maybe lay on the ground and look up into a grove with a little bit of light filtering through, and use that mental image that we can share together to guide a drawing exercise. This will be based a little bit off of 1-point perspective, so we'll start there with the warm-up. Just make sure the hands are back in, ready to move the pen or pencil around. You I'll start a little light with a pencil and see where things go on the paper. But the structure and construction of what will follow starts somewhere with a center, some point. We may draw it here on the warm-up and just imagine it on the next phase. And then lines that work their way in from the edges of our vision towards that center. They don't need to actually touch to it. They don't need to go directly towards it. They can be a little off kilter. Bring to mind the vision of trees. They're not perfectly straight lines. They don't grow in perfectly even arrangements. Some may be close to each other, some further apart, but they all converge in our vision's perspective towards a point somewhere way up there in the sky. Just bringing the hand into play, feeling out how you may want to draw from different directions, getting a grip that's somewhere in the middle, balance, so you can work from the top in, from the bottom up, and start to have this converging field there of lines coming together. A little bit light on the camera, but that's okay. And now, with that field of lines, perhaps it can give a foundation visually before we jump into the next exercise, just to let that image of being on the ground or being low and looking up and feeling the surrounding of a forest, a group of trees, the tall verticality converging overhead, and bringing whatever may come with that, branches, needles, the light featheriness drifting or filtering through, a breeze, the bark, the texture around us, maybe even some of the smells or sounds that come to mind when imagining that. Let that image sink in for a little bit. Maybe close the eyes to it, filling up the internal vision. A couple of deep breaths with it. And as you feel ready, moving to a larger sheet, beginning where we were with the warm-up, somewhere near that center of the page, there's a dot. Happens to be one on my paper. I'll use that. And bringing in from the outside of the vision, those guiding lines towards that center point, converging in perspective, entering our frame or field of vision from the edge of the page, and working till they vanish above. These first lines, they can be quite light on the page, guides towards that center. They may become the shape of a tree if you want to take the vision from the mind more literally, or extract from it that abstraction of converging edges, surrounded, held here by the verticality around us in a forest space. And we can enter a breath a bit with a few of these lines, taking some time to sit with them in between, breathing in to fill out, and exhaling to converge. Again, reaching towards center, breathing in at the edge of the page and exhaling towards that loose convergence in our perspective, bringing that mindfulness to the cycle of breath and the movement of the hands. A few more of these deeper inhalations and exhalations to establish the page in the field. Set the oxygen in the lungs. Prime the brain, the muscles, the nerves to all be present in the phases of the drawing. And with a collection there around, we can begin to thicken them with a little bit of an offset to a line, tracking, again, loosely parallel, but converging towards the center, continuing our inhalation between drawing moments and exhalation to track along. Little bumps and wobbles, just giving some of the nature to a tree that grows with gravity and time. And at the end of them, they begin to approach a point, but not quite. We may leave them loose at the top, the sun coming through behind, obscuring what happens up there in the heights. Now our focus from that edge, exhaling towards the convergence, inhaling to cycle through. And can you hold the image from the warm-up in the mind? You may let the eyes soften a little bit. They can help with the tracking, but in between, reground and recenter on the inhalation, on that image looking up. Held a little bit in place by the surrounding, held a little bit in place by the emptiness of the light filtering through. Breathing in towards the centering. Breathing out to release into that looseness, the space in the middle of the page. And depending on where you've spent your time outdoors, you may have very different images of trees come to mind. But they all grow up. They all share some form of branching structure that filters light out through needles or leaves. In the next phase, we can begin to enter, giving some perhaps definition to these parallel lines, some light, internal twists and notches of bark, swirls or layers that blend those outer profiles, the structure of the direction, with a little softness, a little texture, gradually increasing in density, perhaps decreasing in tone or value towards the top, the closer to our eyes at the edge of the page, where we see the shapes and figures that might form in the growth of each unique individual, the further we converge towards that faraway center, distance and backlighting fade into a soft color or tone here. A chance for some of that image in the mind to work its way through the hands, and a chance for the hand to play, really getting in to a drawing freely of lines next to lines, of edges loosely appearing like something perhaps at first, as with most drawings or other acts of creativity and expression, they may not look as we intend or remember from our image, but with some repetition, with some play, and with the many starting to form, it will take on a character that echoes the softness of our internal eye and imagination, crisp for a moment, shifting, changing focus, and then coming back into clarity, an oscillation of a representation of a thing or an idea, and our imagination of that same context. And depending on how many lines converge around your center on the page, how complex, detailed, or light and loose you may be bringing texture to those, you may begin to fill up some space, and we can begin to work back and forth between the detail of the trunk, the trajectory heading upwards, and perhaps extending out in branches to fill some of the space between, letting those further rounds of detail in the imagination come into play. Some things loosely extending out and upwards, from behind, some even down, foreground and background blending, very far away, very high up. They may not have any thickness, just a wisp of the pen or pencil, heading out in various directions to fill up a little space between those converging lines. They move a little bit in the wind. They move a little bit in the imagination. But they can wobble a little bit, the pen or the pencil, finding attention to your way of drawing them, entering into the little branches extending, have loose, feathery strokes, or more continuous, stable branching, finding it for yourself, what begins to connect the mind, the imagination and remembrance of a thing or place with the hand, with the paper. And hear the context around shifting. If you have a free page there, you may be able to turn the paper to your vantage point or work with what is given, work around in that circle, each new position, a new attention to how it might form. The density forming between the space, extending a few feathery branches out into that loose center. And as we begin to see something in the image, the more lines that take shape, the more they begin to resemble perhaps our imagined image or something nearby to that we see, the more we can open up and let the pen or pencil move quickly and freely, which things come to mind, following the pattern, or perhaps just opening to anything that strikes you in the drawing and guides you in. You may oscillate a little bit between the detail of the trunk and the featheriness and extension of the branches as you work in one or multiple modes within the canvas and techniques you've set up, using that as the place of exercise, a place of attention and mindful practice. What are you doing in each one? How do you move the pencil as the page is set up to offer variation and variety? There'll be different sensations, different configurations of the hand, pulling, pushing, gliding, side to side. And we'll take a few minutes to just explore those sensations of the act of drawing a few different things, keeping an even breath, an even tempo, and observing your action. Depending again on the size of your paper, the speed of your drawing, no need to finish or even know where the end may be, but you may be in various stages of completeness relative to what you've put down on the page. We can continue drawing in that free realm to try to finish out what we've begun, or keep moving between the things that call to us detail forming our perspective, small branches extending to filter the light of the paper, the light of our imagination. And depending on your image, the time of year, the type of tree that comes to mind in this laying in the grove condition, you may start to add a finer level of resolution, the branches at their ends supporting smaller twigs, needles or leaves, softening up even more of that empty space, paper, blending it with graphite or pen or ink. In these final few minutes, finding increased resolution, perhaps picking up a little bit of speed to the motion if that's comfortable, blending the tangle above into a softness, that moving light that comes through. But if you are in a place to kind of increase speed, move the hand quicker to extend like featheriness of needles or leaves out into that open territory, or whatever you're drawing, keep some mindfulness to the breath, not holding in too hard on the intention of achieving, but instead releasing lightly into that creative flow for a minute or two, breathing in, feeling the breath over the nostrils, breathing out, feeling the air move past the nose or lips, letting the hand move at its own rate, maybe a little independent of the breathing. Noticing the inhalation, noticing the exhalation at your pace, the comfortable in and out flow keeps things moving. The air in across the nostrils, the air in through the sinuses, transitioning from the outside temperature to the body's regulated temperature. Do you notice the difference in the exhalation? Cooler air coming in, perhaps. Neutral, stabilized air to our own temperature going out. It perhaps cooling quickly or slowly once it's exhaled, depending on our environment. And that noticing close while the hand moves, the eyes track, bringing it all together in one place, our physical presence, our action, our expression. And then we can let that Breath guide us back, noticing temperature, things outside of this moment, this space, always there. As we slow the hand with a few final marks or strokes, can always return another time if so inspired, or keep it drawing if you would like. As that hand slows down and our time comes to a close, use the last big inhalation to really ground that environment around internally. Fill up with it and exhale back out into it. And come back to your place in your center. As you come back into your own space, I'd like to thank you for joining. Entering here, 2024. This is the first recorded episode, happening on the 2nd of January. You may get a little bit later, as we have episodes here usually about every Wednesday. The recordings may be a week or two behind as we catch up on them. The mindful drawing practice is done live via Mindful Pratt. It's a Zoom room, should be open to anyone if you sign up at Mindful Pratt's website. Otherwise, you can catch the recorded and edited episodes on YouTube every week, usually Wednesday morning. If you're finding, a new year into practice of mindfulness, I hope these can bring a little bit of creativity, self-expression, but also just relaxation in the movement of the hands, the movement of the eyes, the synchronization of the breath, the coming together into that final part of this exercise of that flowing space. The hand may move freely to express a technique. The eyes may soften and drift around or guide in the shapes they see. And the breath can stabilize, can oscillate at a replenishing, relaxing frequency, coming together for a few moments there on the page. And we can get there in just a few minutes if you practice with the exercises, the time before a meeting or a big event. Sit down, let it all converge and come together to establish a grounded, relaxed space to be mindful of your presence, where you are, what you're doing, and what's around you in that environment, to let that convergence of elements, sensations, ideas, and thoughts come together and support you in anything that you happen to be doing. We put in the work, we put in the exercise, we might find some uncomfortableness, some challenge, some exhaustion or tiredness in our mind, in our fingers, in our body, depending on how you're engaging with the paper and where you are sitting or standing today. But whatever you get from it, know that it's building up a reservoir of techniques, a reservoir of ideas, a reservoir of skills that can all support future expression and relaxation. I'll leave you with a few more images from the trip out into the Redwoods. Not a lot of video there, more on a hike, more enjoying the surroundings, and some of that enjoying for me can be taking it in through the lens of a camera, taking some time to see the light in another way, to feel the space and examine the textures, to look at things from a different point of view. So I hope you enjoy. If you like the episode, please give it a thumbs up below. Subscribe for more every week. And feel free to leave some comments letting me know what you've discovered in the exercise. You can find me at Rooks'sfun on social media and share a picture if that suits you. But however you want to engage this practice, temporary moments of mindfulness and awareness, or the initiators of longer exercises to explore what your creativity might unlock there on the paper. I hope it serves you well, brings you some joy and relaxation, enters you into a new year with a new commitment to yourself and to finding ways of expressing that through different mediums. I wish you a wonderful rest of your day and week. Draw well. Thank you.